Welcome to International Definition. My name is Kenneth Freelain, and I'm going to be your host for today's edition of International Definition. Today on International Definition, we're going to feature the engineering tribute to the Presidential Inauguration of January 20th, 2013. Today, we're about to hear from Leslie Glustrom, and she is going to discuss a topic which is of major concern to the engineering profession. Leslie Glustrom is trained as a biochemist with an emphasis on the laws of thermodynamics and the movement of energy and materials through living systems. Inspired by the elegance of living things, and their ability to minimize the production of disorder by careful management, and of the flows of energy and materials, she has dedicated her life to trying to get human economic systems to incorporate the principles that have made life on this planet so remarkably successful. Leslie has over 30 years of experience working at the interface of science and society on a variety of environmental and public health issues. In 2004, Leslie resigned from her job in a biochemistry research laboratory to work full-time on climate change and clean energy issues. She is a co-founder of Boulder, Colorado-based Clean Energy Action, and she is presently serving as the Director of Research and Policy for that organization. Leslie has intervened extensively at the Colorado Public Utilities Commission and in several rate cases and resource planning dockets related to Xcel Energy. She works with citizens and organizations from many states on issues related to the cost and the supply of coal. She traveled around the country in order to speak about these topics. She has also played a key role in the effort of Boulder, Colorado, to remove carbon from its supply of fuels. Leslie has won a variety of awards for her work on clean energy, including awards from the Colorado Solar Energy Industry Association, the Colorado Renewable Energy Society, Plan Boulder, and the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center. She has authored a number of reports on American coal supplies and coal costs, and she is a co-author of a Harvard study which is entitled, quote, Full Cost Accounting for the Life Cycle of Coal, unquote. This study was published in 2011. Leslie and her husband, Mara Glustrom, are the parents of 2 grown children and make their home in Boulder, Colorado. So now, let's hear from Leslie. Leslie, it's good to have you on the show.
Kenneth, awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity. We have a large challenge ahead of us with respect to getting our country repowered for this century. It's a very large engineering challenge, but it's also a tremendous opportunity. And as we move forward with this challenge, we will unleash tremendous innovation in our country, and that will help drive a new wave of economic development that's really very exciting. They've begun to realize that when you invest in ways to generate electricity that don't require fossil fuels, ultimately you actually end up bringing in electricity that allows us to start stabilizing our costs and will come in underneath the cost of the fossil fuel generated electricity. Again, this is data that we have from my state in Colorado, and we're seeing it increasingly around the country, that when we invest in wind and solar, fuel-free ways of generating electricity. Wind, we know now, is already very cost competitive in many, many situations, And solar is, the costs of solar have dropped dramatically in the last 5 years. We expect them to continue to drop as efficiency of cells, as we get better manufacturing facilities. And those costs of solar are already dropping, and we expect solar to be very cost competitive in either, it's already cost competitive in some parts of the country. We expect it to become increasingly cost competitive as we go forward. So you're right, as long as we stay on an electric system that's very fossil fuel driven, it's just going to be out of the frying pan and into the fire. You can pay for coal, you can pay for natural gas, and they're going to just keep getting more and more expensive and making it harder and harder for people to pay. So part of this repowering, the imperative of repowering, is driven by the economics of how we generate our electricity. And we have to, in a sense, have the courage to create a new system that's based not on fossil fuels, but on renewable electricity that we won't be paying fuel costs for. And that requires having some courage and having a belief in our ability to do it. I happen to have that belief. I've seen people do it all over this country as well as all over the world. And that's the engineering challenge that's both an imperative and also an incredibly exciting opportunity for our country. So again, coming back, looking at what's going on, this is the Powder River Basin. In 2008, when the United States Geological Survey looked at it, they cut the amount of economic recoverable coal from 17% to 6%, a small fraction of what's out there. Most of that coal, again, is buried too deeply to be recovered at any price. And we're seeing this play out with the coal industry right now in the United States. Our biggest coal company, Peabody, spun off their eastern mines into Patriot. Patriot filed for bankruptcy in the summer of 2012, leaving those miners without, as far as we can tell, without health care benefits and pensions. Those eastern mines are not really profitable anymore. Peabody's primarily focusing on Asia. Our second and third largest coal companies, Alpha Natural Resources and Arch, have both been put on high alert for bankruptcy. And that's a sign that, and if they're going to get out of bankruptcy, they're going to have to raise their prices. And that's hard because their production costs are going up, and as they raise their prices, they're less economically, financially sound. And then we also see that they're having a lot of our coal companies, our United States coal companies, are having a hard time refinancing their debt. And when your debt comes due, and if you can't either pay it or refinance it, you're in really serious trouble. And both Alpha Natural and Arch, our second and third largest coal companies, are having a lot of problems refinancing their debt. They've been put on high alert related to bankruptcy. Peabody spun off their eastern mines. Those went bankrupt as Patriot. And now Peabody, most of their profit margins are coming from their efforts, their mining, their mines in Australia, Mongolia, China. They're putting most of their emphasis on Asia. That's where the profit margins are still pretty big. Something that not a lot of people know is that the federal government owns most of the coal in the western United States. All the red on this map is federally owned coal. Many of us believe it's a strategic resource. We should save some of it for future generations. We should not be what they call leasing it to coal companies for typically $1 a ton, something like that. And that's just giving this coal away, and we really question whether the federal government should be doing this. Also put this graphic up to show, for example, the Black Thunder mine, one of the two largest coal mines, and we can see that gray is getting close to the green, which is the joint rail line. This is a very serious issue because our largest coal mines are starting to bump up against a rail line. Moving to the other side of that rail line is going to be very expensive, and the coal will be buried much more deeply. So we'll take a quick look at the Black Thunder mine. The remaining life of this, one of our two largest coal mines, is about 5 years. They're going in for expansions, but the coal that's in the expansion area will be buried much more deeply because, again, the Powder River Basin is a bowl, and the coal beds are not flat, they're sloped, and you have to dig down farther to get to them. North Antelope Rochelle, the other one of the top two coal mines in this country, each of these mines provides about 10% of our country's coal. We have less than 6 years. 6 years is a very different number than 200 years. They can go in for these expansions, Those expansions are going to require large capital investments, and the coal is going to be buried much more deeply. And we don't know whether they'll be able to finance that debt. And even if they can finance this expansion, which would add about 10 years, will they be able to finance the expansion in the 2020s? And all of this leads to the imperative to repower our country. This is a graph that shows the ability that 77 billion tons, if you were to dig down, you might find that the USGS talks about 77 billion tons. That's technically recoverable coal. You can see that in order to use that, we'd have to start paying $60 a ton for coal out of the Powder River Basin. Right now, we pay about $10 to $12 a ton, something like that, for that coal. So that coal is technically recoverable, but do we really want to pay at least 4 or 5 times as much as we're paying that for coal now? What will that do to our utility bills?
So what is the graph showing us?
The graph, this graph, that's a good question. This graph is what's called the cost curve. The red line shows us how much coal we think we could, the USGS thinks we could mine, and the vertical axis is the cost. So as you increase the cost, you're going to be able to recover more coal out of that huge coal bed out in Wyoming called the Powder River Basin. But as you go, you can see an inflection point in the place where the curve bends up quite steeply. That's going to coal that's buried quite a bit more deeply. You're going to have to move a lot more dirt, something called the stripping ratio, the number of tons of dirt you have to move to get to a ton of coal. When at that inflection point is around 4 and 5 tons of dirt that have to be moved to get to 1 ton of coal. And we have to ask, are we really going to do that? Do we really want to be moving 4 and 5 tons of dirt to get to 1 ton of coal when we know we can produce electricity with wind and solar, and it's either cost competitive already or about to be? And so all of this again leads to the imperative of getting
but just before you change it,
yes.
What are the units on the vertical axis?
Yeah, those are the cost per ton of coal, and down at the bottom it's about $10 a ton of coal, and up you can see up where we get out to the 77 billion tons, that's where it would be $60 a ton of coal.
So it says DCF cost.
So,
am I reading that right?
So discounted cost.
Oh, okay, okay.
Looking out at as we go out in time.
Right.
So,
okay.
And you know, so we don't know how far out this cost curve will be going. Will we go all the way out to that 77 billion tons? Will we pay 5 or 6 times as much for our coal? Will we pass those costs on to low income and moderate income utility ratepayers? Many of us think we won't. But that leads to the imperative of repowering our country, because we built our electric grid around our coal plants for the most part. And if the coal to operate those coal plants is increasing significantly in price, then we have to find a way to get our country repowered. And we have to really think about this, because kind of like remodeling your house, the coal plants are kind of like the support beams for the electric system. And you can't just retire those coal plants or walk away from them and expect the power flows to work well in the transmission system. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but it's just like when you go to remodel your house. There are some walls you can knock down and it's not a big deal. When you knock down the supporting wall, you're in deep trouble. And so it is with our coal plants. That's why we have to face the reality around our coal supplies, look carefully at what's going on with the cost of coal presently, and then start to plan, because you can't just do this in a year or 2 years. It takes a long time to take out a coal plant, replace it with what you're going to replace it, make sure the transmission system works well. And if we don't have proper power flows in our transmission system, the lights don't go on. And that's really, really serious. So we've got to start thinking about this problem now, and we've got to start planning and not assuming we have a 200-year supply of coal that's just going to show up and it's going to be cheap and abundant. We've heard a lot of politicians say that. That's wrong. It's wrong because the EIA has been publishing coal reserves that aren't reserves, and that's a serious case of misinformation in our country.
For those people who just tuned in, we're listening to Leslie Glustrom, and she's talking about coal supplies. Here in Montgomery County, Maryland, there have been a number of hearings focusing on the electric power company. Here we have a company called the Potomac Electric Power Company, or PEPCO. And a lot of people have been very critical of PEPCO. If what you're saying is true, the electric power companies should be on top of this issue, because just looking down the road, their supply of fuel for generating electric power is going to be inaccessible to them in the not too distant future. Well,
thank you so much. That's exactly the truth, and you've really, hit the nail on the head, as they say. And what's been very surprising to me, as I work with utilities around the country, they don't understand this. They don't understand what's going on with coal because they rely on the Energy Information Administration. EIA told them there's 200 years of coal, and they many of them have stopped asking questions. The other problem is that the utilities, for example, PEPCO, I believe this is the case, they don't have any risk around future fuel costs, and they make profits from investing in coal plants and other fossil fuel infrastructure. So one of the analogies I sometimes make is, if you could make profits from buying, let's call, say, Hummers, the more Hummers you were to invest in, the more profits you're going to get, because that's the way your industry is set up, the way the electric utility industry is set up. And not only that, you get those profits from the Hummers, but when you have to go to the gas pump and fill it up, you get to give me the fuel bill. That's a split incentive, so to speak. The utilities don't have any of that risk, and you're absolutely right. They should be analyzing these issues very carefully. They should be looking at the Black Thunder and the North Antelope Rochelle mines and saying, whoa, less than 10 years life on our largest coal mines. Whoa, coal mines all over the East being shut down because they can't mine the coal profitably. What's the role of coal plants with respect to holding up our transmission grid? These are the engineering challenges facing our country, and we would hope that the utilities were looking carefully at them. My experience has been they're not, and that's why frankly, this show is so important. This is the engineering challenge that's fundamental to everything we do, because essentially everything we do depends on electricity. And sometimes at this point I say, we haven't gotten anything else wrong in this country, and I'm being sarcastic because we've gotten quite a few things wrong. But we've definitely got this one wrong, and this is the mother of them all, because without electricity, nothing much happens. So anyways, just here we are again. This is the challenge ahead of us. One would hope that all the utilities were analyzing this and looking carefully at it. My experience is they are not. We've asked my utility in Excel in Colorado several times in a legal proceeding, what analyses have you done of your long-term coal supplies? And until just the last year, they finally did one. But all the while they were spending $1 billion on a new coal plant down in Pueblo, Colorado, we would ask them, what analyses have you done of your long-term coal supplies? And they go, no such analysis has been conducted. And I'm happy to provide that what's called discovery response to anybody who wants it. So it's important that your viewers start to ask these questions, start to ask them in community meetings, start to review some of this information. We try to make this information available free to anybody who wants it through Clean Energy Action. Quite a bit of it is on our website, and the rest of it I'm happy to provide to people if they just get in touch with me.
Can you give us the URL for your website?
Yes, most of this information is at the Clean Energy Action website, which is www.cleanenergyaction.org.
All right.
So,
can you say that one more time, please?
Yes, the website is
Okay.
www.cleanenergyaction.org.
Very good.
And so you just Google Clean Energy Action, and it should come up under research reports. You'll find quite a bit of the coal data. And the rest of it, you can either get in touch with me or info@cleanenergyaction.org, and the staff will get it to me.
And how can people contact you?
My contact information is on the last slide, but I'll give it to you here now. My phone is 303-245-8637. And my email is lglustrom@gmail.com.
Very good.
Let's hope I don't get too much more spam. Here's another problem.
There's enough of that to go around.
Here's enough of that to go around. Here's another kind of challenge with respect to getting our country repowered. This is the transport of coal. You can see it coming out of Wyoming and then coming across Nebraska and then getting distributed around our country, as well as coal in the Appalachian region being distributed through the Appalachia. But our railroad system is not in great shape.
Now there you're getting to another topic that we're going to analyze during the engineering tribute, and that would be the infrastructure.
Absolutely. And so as we think about this century and as we think about getting our country repowered for our children, our grandchildren, and on down, just as our ancestors made sure that we had the power so we could have a fabulous 20th century in the United States, it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to, because these railroad systems are pretty much at capacity. If we try to get more coal out of Wyoming, it's not going to be easy to do. And a lot of people say, instead of shipping coal around the country, let's learn how to ship electrons, make the electricity where the wind blows and the sun shines, face the fact that getting ourselves repowered is an imperative, recognizing that we have monumental amount of solar resource in this country, easily way over 10 times as much solar as we need to power the country. You don't have the sun shining all over the country all the time, but if we're willing to ship coal in these mile-long trains of coal, typical coal plant needs a mile-long train of coal about almost a day, so we can produce our electricity where the sun shines and where the wind blows. And instead of shipping coal across the country on our antiquated railroad system, we can ship this incredible solar resource that we have in the Southwest. And here's our wind resource, which we have just magnificent wind resource in the Great Plains. We can ship this around the country instead of shipping coal. We can ship these electrons. We can create a 21st century power system for our country. We can start to stabilize our utility bills. And we can build sustainable jobs, jobs that depend on renewable resources. The sun's going to keep shining for a good long while. The wind's going to keep blowing. We're no longer trying to create jobs on a non-renewable resource. Those jobs tend to be rather boom-bust kinds of things. We've seen an awful lot of that out west. We're seeing that sort of phenomena in Appalachia, these coal mining communities. When the coal's gone, you're pretty much done. And the community doesn't have a diversified economy, and it's a serious issue. So we do have about easily 20 times the wind and solar we need. The National Renewable Energy Lab has told us we can keep the country powered with that. We can easily get up to 80% renewable energy. We can do it at costs that are reasonable. And that's our challenge. That's our imperative. That's our opportunity. And I, for one, am really looking forward to working with people all around the country as we face this challenge, as we unleash the innovation that we know exists in this country, and we create an electric grid that's worthy of the 21st century, making us worthy of our superpower status once again. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Leslie, it's been good having you on the show. I appreciate your presentation here. I'm glad that you were able to join us for today's edition of International Definition. Today on International Definition, we heard from Leslie Glustrom as she discussed a topic which is a major concern to the engineering profession. Leslie was participating in the engineering tribute to the Presidential Inauguration of January the 20th, 2013. And now, until our next broadcast, I'm your host, Kenneth Freelain, thanking you for joining us today.